Welcome to ET AeroDef Summit 2021. Dialogues on future of India's aerospace and defense landscape. Partner state, MIDC.
ET AeroDefense 2021 Summit aims to initiate a much-needed discourse on India's approach and strategy to become a self-reliant military superpower. Our esteemed panelists and speakers will share their valuable insights on the future of Indian defense. Our first speaker of the day is a well-known media commentator on global, military and national security issues. He is a military historian and has served in the Indian Army from 1980 with the Grenadiers and the Mechanized Infantry Regiments and served as instructor at the Indian Military Academy. He has authored several books, essays and articles for India's leading publications.
Presenting Maroof Raza, Consulting Editor, Strategic Affairs, Times TV Network, and his thoughts around artificial intelligence and its impact on national security.
Even though as late as 1920s, which is 100 years ago, there was a play in the US which talked about Rossum's universal robots. It was only in 1976 and 77 that the IBM produced a computer that was pitted against the chess genius Garry Kasparov. And after a first set of championship efforts, the second time the computer was pitted against perhaps the world's best chess brain, the computer beat him to it. And that is when the idea took on that computers could play the role of humans. This did cause a certain amount of insecurity in the US, primarily because there was a fear that computers will take all jobs away. In fact, it led to reassurances in the market that computers won't do that. But over a period of time, computers and robots and what we call now artificial intelligence has come to be the buzzword amongst defense-related technology companies. What can it really do? Can it really replace the role of human beings, especially high-level commanders in the battlefield? Can wars and conflicts be fought only by robots and artificially empowered aircrafts and ships and submarines? Or are we looking at a mix between the two? General understanding amongst experts is that trials have shown that major decisions that need to be made on the battlefield do require very quick inputs to come in for commanders. But those inputs collectively still need somebody to take a decision in the context of the modern battlefield, because there are elements of international law that have to be weighed before you launch firepower and troops into a certain direction, the collateral damage that could happen with it, and equally the complex environment of the battlefield, what earlier military experts called the fog of war, does not allow a computer-based weapons platform or a robot to be able to take all those decisions. That only trained and sensitized minds can do that. So where are we at? As far as air and naval warfare is concerned, the possibility of computers playing a greater role in the use of weapons platforms is more and more becoming a popular approach amongst aviation and naval experts, particularly in what they are calling now the sixth generation aircraft program. Classically, the Rafale aircraft that Indian Air Force now has is a 4.5 generation. The fifth generation is something like the US fifth generation fighters, or what the Chinese claim they have. This allows the aircraft to evade detection from enemy radars and aircrafts in the air which are trying to hit it in a dogfight. But a sixth generation one is obviously going to be a generation ahead. But we are still talking about things being on the drawing board, not quite clearly. It's something that will be off the platform and on the runway in the next few years. The other aspect that we need to understand is what can the robot do in terms of land warfare or ground warfare, situations like Afghanistan, situations like Iraq, or the India-Pakistan context on the LOC, or now the Sino-Indian context in the LAC. What it can do is limited. For example, there is a US defense project called PETMAN. In the PETMAN project, they have got robots to climb stairs, to do push-ups, and do some human activity, even wearing uniforms, to go into combat areas to see what kind of damage the body can suffer in the event of walking into a minefield or in a chemical warfare zone, because they've even replicated the impact of chemical warfare on the human skin. However, having said that, it has its limitations because, for example, it needs very close monitoring and direction. A soldier is trained to operate in various circumstances. Above all, it's the human instinct which soldiers, fighter pilots, and submariners and naval men have, who take decisions even in a conflict situation based on how the human being would react. Or, for example, if you're launched in a battlefield situation, you have all guns firing towards the enemy, and suddenly you find the situation is not what you had planned for. There are humans caught up in the crossfire. The robot or the artificially empowered platform will not be able to differentiate between an innocent and the so-called enemy. They will fire at anything that moves in front of them. That is where the human element in decision making makes it very important, that that brain has to be put inside the robots who you may launch on the battlefield. The other aspect is that it is being said that while developments have taken place up to a point, the human brain, the incorporation of the human brain into a human-sized robot on the battlefield is even now the biggest challenge. In fact, research has shown that perhaps the most developed human brain activity that a robot can be taking on in today's battlefield is what has been developed in Japan. But the brain size and the brain's actions are even now limited to how a cockroach thinks and a cockroach works. That means essentially moving and surviving in a dangerous environment, not beyond that, at least for now. The second big challenge is that how do you use these applications in the conflict environment? There are issues that have been brought out in terms of how aircrafts can be used for navigating their way and firing weapon systems. But again, if climatic conditions change, if the aircraft is pitted against multiple aircrafts from the enemy's side, and the algorithms that are fed into this platform haven't taken into account those eventualities. So it's not going to operate the way seasoned, trained, top of the line, Top Gun pilots would operate. And therefore, they would still require a lot of monitoring and a lot of control from ground stations. Like drones are required to be able to be operated by drone operators in a battlefield or in a conflict situation, not from just going from place A to place B by lifting packages. That doesn't require too much in the mind of these artificially empowered next generation air platforms. But when you're looking at a conflict situation, we're talking about the use of artificial intelligence in future battlefields. The second area, which I think is going to be a very big challenge, is to be constantly being one up on what your adversary is already coming out with. So for example, you create a military platform that is artificially empowered. The enemy or the adversary knows you're already working towards it. They would then create counters which the artificially empowered platform could be limited in performing its roles. So how do you keep one step ahead? And that really brings me to the central question that if we really think that is the area of the future, are we going to be investing sufficiently in it, or we are going to wait for America and Russia to keep inventing these technologies and we just buy them off, and as is the Indian reputation, we replicate or assemble it here and then we call it make in India? That is not quite it. If you really want to be in the cutting edge sphere, you call your country a leading IT power, then we all have to ensure that funding and opportunities are created for doing more research, more production of prototypes that can get buyers within the armed forces that would have the option of buying Indian made stuff as against what is made in the US, which is really your go-to approach all the time. The DRDO has a Center for Artificial Intelligence, but it works in a very limited way with IITs and Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore and has limited funding. So we are now basically trying to talk about futuristic projects more to showcase in exhibitions than going in for the kind of production scales that we would need in the long term. And the final point in the Indian context is that why do we limit research and all defense related production only to the Ministry of Defense run DPSUs? Why can't we open up the use of intelligence applications to our top of the line IT companies that we keep boasting about, that have made India the so-called superpower in intelligence gathering and intelligence related equipment, and more so in information technology? Unless we involve the private sector, I think we are going to see the same kind of limitations that the public sector enterprises have come in for criticism over the years. And 3 or 4 quick points about the limitations of artificial intelligence overall. First is that though trials have taken place in the US about even AI empowered aircrafts that have taken on the F-16s against pilot-led aircrafts, and in some cases they've claimed a 5-0 result in favor of AI empowered aircrafts of the US. Critics would say that it is a showcasing of artificial intelligence by those companies that want to bag the big orders in that space. Because how would the aircraft react, supposing if it's artificially empowered and there is complete bad weather and it can't see the adversary? How would the aircraft react if at the last minute the decision is taken at the highest level that we needn't bomb a target, but we need to call them back, as President Trump did a year or 2 ago against Iran? How would these aircrafts react in case there are other enemy aircrafts that come in its path when its systems weren't programmed to fight or intercept them? Those questions still remain. The second problem is that real life combat will always produce surprises. And it is those surprises that senior commanders who are controlling the combat situation can respond to with agility because of their experience, because most of them have commanded troops on the ground. I mean, a classic example is that wherever in conflict, military commanders were put in charge of situations who hadn't previously fought battles or commanded troops on the ground. They performed miserably. The case of General Kohl in the 1962 conflict in the Nifa front against China is a case in point. There were other military commanders who were paper tigers and have risen to the top, making the right presentations, but when conflict situations suddenly developed into what they had never seen or experienced, they were not able to react. So there is an important limitation there, again, of artificial intelligence. The other aspect is that the software that artificially empowered weapons platforms use could again lead to problems. For example, if the enemy uses electronic warfare capabilities, it could jam some of the systems that are in your aircraft or whatever else you empowered, AI empowered platforms that are using, like submarines or ships. The other aspect, and finally, is that the enemy could fire at those AI empowered weapons platforms and make them dysfunctional, because something may go wrong with the capability of that system, whereas a human part aircraft or a ship or a submarine would continue to move towards the target because A, the pilot might be a daredevil, or the pilot may decide, I still have the capability and the fuel and the resources to bomb my target and get back to base. And finally, if we decide to call off a mission, artificially empowered missiles and aircrafts, they have a cutoff distance after which your commands cannot be reacted to, whereas human empowered weapons platforms can be turned around at the last minute to save a disaster or a casualty, which would be an embarrassment for the nation to answer when the world media is beating down your neck. And the most important point is legal compliance. Can artificially empowered weapons platforms make judicious judgments on issues and targets which could become an embarrassment for the nation in future? For example, if you hit a target which accidentally turns out to be a large civilian human settlement and not a military encampment, as your radar shots may have shown, you have a human rights problem on your hand, which is not going to go easily. From the United Nations to the world press, everyone's going to be on your tail. And last and most important is, would the robots and artificially empowered platforms of the future be able to give you the kind of inputs that a human empowered platform can give you, even when close to the target, in terms of intelligence gathering, photo reconnaissance, and assessment? These have their advantages, these have their limitations. There is no denying that perhaps in future we will see a lot more of it. But as of now, let us go back to the brass tacks and let us also accept the fact that America, with all its technologies, hasn't achieved anything in 19 years in Afghanistan. So it's a long way off, despite the tech giants boasting that that is going to be the defining technology for the future. Thank you.
With this insightful address by Maroof Raza, let's move on to our first panel discussion on Make in India and how it can propel India's defense sector to become a self-reliant and self-sufficient force.
AeroDef 2021 aims to address the technological developments and innovations in the aerospace and defense landscape. Today's panel is Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, India moving towards a self-reliant defense manufacturing industry. Our esteemed panelists for today are Dr. Deepak Hota, who is the former CMD, BEML. Then we have Mr. Anuj Prasad, who is partner, head, aerospace and defense at Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas. And finally, we have Major General Rohit Gupta, who heads the aerospace and defense section of Primus Partners. Welcome, all of you.
Thank you very much, Aditya.
Thank you.
So let me start with you, Dr. Hota. I just wanted to ask you about the whole Make in India, and then the Make in India process began when the government came into power, and then it shifted to Atmanirbhar Bharat. So how has this process been? You've been in the government, you know how it has worked. So what sort of insight can you give us about the whole process?
Yeah, so let me start with, what defense used to be earlier. There used to be a lot of imports, and we were very happy importing. And really, the domestic manufacturing did not sort of come of age. Now, the government came out with first the Make in India and thereafter the Atmanirbhar. Now, one would imagine that these were just slogans. But when you look at the policy parameters and the policy initiatives which came, they were extremely serious about it. For example, the defense corridors did come up in two major states, Tamil Nadu and UP, 74% under automatic route, and thereafter beyond 74, even in the case of government route. Now, public procurement, local content is something that the DPIIT first came out with its order in 2017, and thereafter they have followed it up with a series of clarifications. I happen to head the FICCI chair of public procurement, and I remember we used to have umpteen number of interactions with the various stakeholders. And I think that is one of the hallmarks of this government. They do not just mandate that you have to do this. Even the 101 items that were put in the negative list, this came up through a process of interaction with us. I was at that time heading BML, and very clearly they consulted us and asked us what are the timelines. And of course, there was a little bit of interaction there. So that is how the list came out. They have also in the DAP defense acquisition policy, which again has come through a series of interactions. And this happened at the COVID time. They have come out with a number of things like the IDEX, the Technology Development Fund. They are trying to support the startups, the R&D. There's a lot of industry academia interface support. Even the single stage approval for acceptance of necessity, except in DSC cases which are more than 500 crores. Now, these would go a long way. Now, if you look at the DPIIT policy, I remember at that time, I was batting for reciprocity. I said that, look, there are certain countries which do not allow us to go anywhere near them. And forget about reciprocity, even the line of credit that we give to our whichever countries for strategic reasons, we land up not selling it. So I'm very happy to say that the reciprocity has come in, and those countries which do not allow us, they will not, those entities will not be allowed to bid. Now, that is one very wonderful thing which has happened. Second is, earlier there was a definition of Indian companies. Now, this definition of Indian company was amended earlier. This is again come back to say the ownership, it has to be 50% Indian resident and managed by Indians. Otherwise, what was happening? Some MNC would set up a shop in India and come under the definition of Indian company and land up exporting. But let's look at the larger context. We are one of the largest markets, but we have to leverage our buying capacity. If we take a particular platform and we keep changing the technology, changing the platform very now and then, there will not be any Make in India, if you really ask me. So the government has identified certain platforms, certain technologies, and these would have part of the army planning process. Then there would be capacity. For example, I can give you the example of the metro manufacturing in India. Now we have BML is a very major player, but today as the market demand and supply is there, we have a surplus capacity. We can produce more than we can consume now. Now what happens in Japan? Japan Rail, JR, what they do is they go and give work to everyone. In a way, they share the poverty. The point I'm trying to make is setting up shop, having investments in India is one thing. But if these guys don't have continuous orders, and this is where the Ministry of Defense also, and we have taken it up a number of times, the time order cycle for the order to fructify is sometimes agonizingly large. And in between, you have the foreign exchange issues and all that which comes. But I would say that these are all issues which are getting sorted out. There have been a lot of success stories, I would say. For example, the ARRV, Armored Arjun Repair Vehicle that BML is doing, the 1500 horsepower tank that we are doing for the main battle tank. These are all pluses that are happening. And I would say that this government should continue to tighten. For example, we earlier, we used to do a fair amount of import for very high technology items in the metro coaches. Now, in the metro, unmanned train operation that we are supplying now to Mumbai Metro, we were told that you cannot go for global tender inquiry if it is more than 200 crores. Now, we were aghast. We said, how can you do this? But you'd be happy to know that there was a way, there was a method in madness, and there was a negotiation, there was a discussion, and finally things fell into place. So the point I'm trying to make is, as some of you might say, this 101 items which have been banned for import, in the short run, it's a very painful thing. But in the medium to long term, it's fantastic for the country. I would stop there, and thereafter, I could step in. Thank you very much.
All right. Major Gupta, you've been on both sides of the divide. You've served in the armed forces and now you work for the private sector. How would you see the development of, the Indian defense manufacturing industrial complex, if I may use that term? How would you see it over the years? Okay. Not just limited to this government, but over the years, because you have a wide set of experience. You have spent years in this industry.
Yes, I've been over 5 ranks and 8 years in procurement in different ranks. So I've seen the run of complete thing, including the FIC project, which I headed the IPM team. Now, frankly speaking, the military wants a product. They want a product which can meet its QR, and they want the product in time. Till now, the industry has been lacking in both issues of producing a product which can be considered as state of art or near state of art, or being considered as being timely enough to be relevant in the modern era. The issue is a problem with the armed forces also, because the procurement process, the trial process, the contract negotiating process, the etc. The entire process of procurement impedes the speed at which it is required to be inducted into the military. Now, the present DPP, Mr. Hota is absolutely correct, has gone in through almost 2 to 3 years of iteration between all stakeholders. I think it is a holistic document that in future can move the defense industry forward. However, I would like to point out a little fallacy in the matter. While all of this is in paper, what will happen on ground? You want a state-of-art project. That means the company has to put in R&D, procure foreign technology, and be able to produce a product according to your requirement. If that is so, it will have to pump in money. And when you are pumping in money, at times, it is almost equivalent to 50% of the order in R&D and development of the particular prototype. If you have no surety of the order, if you have no surety of what is going to happen, the industry cannot, the economic considerations do not allow it to pump in so much of money. As a result, you do not find the project. You look at Make One, there were 2 big deals of the tactical communication system and the FICV. Yeah. Both of them dropped. I know companies which have pumped in immense amount of money, whereas 500 crores per prototype of the FICV was guaranteed. The companies did almost 2,000 crores worth, even towards reaching any stage of prototype. They still not fully developed the prototype. Now, if that is the case, and if the case drops from Make One, you have a problem and the industry loses confidence. Second issue is, does it have any surety of order given time that would be required for the development of the product? The surety of order is not there. There has been fallacies in the past in which, because of pressing considerations, operational and strategic consideration, the military was forced to go abroad and buy the product, yes, whereas they could not await the development of the product either by DRDO or by the industry. Now, these are considerations which cannot be obviated. You cannot wish them away because your security considerations cannot wait for somebody to develop a particular product. So, like I said, that the problem is in both sides. What is the solution to it? The Make One, which is the flagship of the government towards Atmanirbhar Bharat. However, the same problem comes in. The industry does not have the money. They do not have surety of order. The time span is too much. The Make One procedure actually is longer than the balance of the procurement procedures like Buy Indian, Buy Make in India, etc. In fact, the earliest and the fastest procedure is Buy Global, government to government, or the FTP procedures. So neither is the military very enamored with the procedure, neither is the industry enamored with the procedure. There is one thing in the DAP and the previous DPP also, 2016, which is the strategic partnership model.
Yes.
It enables the industry to get government support, to go out with a foreign OEM hand in hand with a guaranteed order, whether even if it is competitive among two industries, you still may get a percentage of the order, and therefore redeem the amount of investment is done in the development of the project. And since the government has a hand in it, you have the foreign OEMs also providing the technology that is necessary. Today, it is a fallacy to say that that a country can produce a complex weapon system by itself. No country does it. Whether it's Lockheed Martin, Boeing,
absolutely.
Whether it is development of the tank, you have Germany and France developing a tank. You got the BrahMos missile, state of art. You got Russia and India doing it. Anything you take, so there are foreign procurements that are done, components that come into this. Obviously, because it is not costly and conducive to start a product development from scratch. If somebody has got a seeker in a thermal imaging devices, why should you start developing a seeker when you have a guaranteed economic tie-up with that particular country and understanding with the country? It may well be investing in India in a joint venture. So a strategic partnership model, given that 2 to 3 companies per strategic product are earmarked by the government, handheld, maybe financed or facilitating for finance, and foreign OEMs earmarked, which the military finds that the product is conducive to be inducted into the army or into the military.
Yeah.
Once that is so, the industry as well as the military goes hand in hand. In fact, this is the very model that actually looks towards Atmanirbhar Bharat or self-reliance in defense. And this is the model that we should actually stress upon. The balance of the models can be there for the purposes of smaller procurement. But when we are going in for strategic projects like ships, which we already have on a strategic partnership model with LNK and doing fantastically well, or we are with new FRCV, the futuristic ready combat vehicle of the tank, or for the FICV, or for the 5th generation fighter, or for any one of the electronic components, radars, or any product like this, we have to go in the strategic partnership model where the industry gets a surety of an order, hand-holding, can pump in money, and can develop. Today, what is happening, you've got a multitude of companies investing in the same R&D of the same product.
Yeah.
There is no guideline, there is no hand-holding, there is no guidance from the top. Which is the organization that can do that? Is DRDO.
Yeah,
they should bring focus to the industry on what are they producing, what the industry is producing, and who are the tier 1, the tier 2, what type of technology are they developing, where are they getting it from, and they can mesh it together. Now, for that to happen, firstly, the government has to know what is the defense industry, who is composed in the defense industry. The defense industry is not Bharat Forge, L&T, Tata, Mahindra, Adani Group, etc. It's a plethora of companies that are there in the tier 1 and the tier 2. Maybe more than 10,000 companies.
Absolutely, sir.
Now, when you do not know what these companies are, who are they producing, what are they producing, how can you be able to orchestrate synergy in the complete defense manufacture and reach any state of surety of developing a project? We have to have a model, something like, okay, what is happening to BEML today? You got a defense PSU. you got government selling of stakes, retaining 25 to 26% stakes so that they remain as a policeman on the board, as a watchdog on the board. But the private sector getting 26% and possibly off the market getting another 26% with about 25%, with 51%, they're becoming majority stakeholders. Now, if BEML produces HMVs, they produce AARV, they produce the WZT3, these are strategic partners. Now you got a private-public partnership, which is taking place under the umbrella of the government with 26% on the board, but the complete management, the complete outlay and everything on the hands of a private company. What else do you need as a better model for the purposes of privatization, as well as in terms of strategic partnership in Atmanirbhar Bharat? Now what happens is a company which has bought it can be a supplier to BEML. BEML cannot produce everything. So there is the private company that is principally gaining, both in terms of a hold on BEML, being able to synergize the activity and make it more efficient. It is efficient, more efficient. Plus, you have the private industry supplying it. It is the best kind of a model that can ever happen. The socialist system remains to stay, as well as a democratic system of privatization, best efficiency in the economy is brought in. These are the issues I would like to raise.
Thank you, Major Gupta. That was very comprehensive. Now, coming to Mr. Prasad, who heads the aerospace and defense sector, which is very important in my opinion. I mean, I think he's got a lot to offer when it comes to his comments. What is your opinion, Mr. Prasad, on this? You have heard Major Gupta, you have heard Dr. Hota. At the end, what would you like to say?
Just taking on from what Major Gupta said, I agree that strategic partnership was, a very powerful tool to develop the industry and take the sector forward. Unfortunately, the reality is that, no single procurement has really moved forward. They're all stuck at various stages, and nothing has happened under this model, even though it was introduced under DPP 2016. So there is definitely a gap between, the paper policy and actions on the ground. Now, if you look at the sector historically, what has the approach of the government been to try and push it forward? The Indian defense industry, so to speak. The first real initiative was, the introduction of offsets under DPP 2006. The idea was that you would use the offset contracts to grow the industry, inculcate expertise, and build the defense industry so that it could become less of a component manufacturer and more of a system integrator over time.
Yeah.
Again, a very laudable objective. It didn't really go forward in the way intended. So far, since 2006, there have been about, I think, 54 offset contracts, which the government has entered into with various international players. Of these 54 offset contracts, I think, about 10 or 15 Indian companies have really, participated in these offset contracts. The industry really hasn't grown the way it was supposed to using the offset initiative. Recognizing that there was this slow shift first towards Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat. And that's finally concluded in the DAP 2020, the Defense Acquisition Procedure. They've done a very interesting thing in DAP 2020 in terms of, very significantly walking away from offsets. The reality is that, all major international procurements that various governments have done have all been under the government-to-government route. There have been few, if any, successful bid-out procurements under the buy global model. And therefore, the offsets are really flowing from these government-to-government contracts, whether with Dassault, Lockheed, Boeing, and Airbus. So that was really the genesis of the offset. In DAP 2020, they've removed offsets from government-to-government deals. And that changes the landscape significantly.
Right.
not only for the foreign players, but also for the Indian industry. There were a lot of players coming into the defense sector, to benefit from or get involved with offset contracts. That is not going to be a very viable option going forward. So the path very clearly has been set towards import substitution, towards Atmanirbhar Bharat, and also for foreign companies to participate in Make in India and not just look at doing global sales and putting in some money in India through offsets. So overall, I think this is a very positive step and may actually grow the industry faster than what was happening till now. Let's see how it plays out on the ground.
Mr. Prasad, this policy uncertainty, this continuous changes every 4 years or 3 years in the policy handbook. Do you think it really helps, because you represent clients? You are someone who represent actual clients on the ground. Do you think it really helps in the long term? Because I think this dilly-dallying, this sort of unsurety, this sort of let's plug the holes as we go along policy. I think it's a bit problematic. What do you say?
Well, actually, no, I disagree a bit on that. What I've seen is that, all the changes in the policy have been towards liberalization.
Okay.
They've been towards easing up. They've been towards industry-friendly actions. So the policy is well-intentioned. It has, specific timelines embedded in it. The problem really is not the policy. The problem is the difference between policy, what's happening on the ground, execution, timelines, uncertainty of contract, even after contract award. That's where the issues lie. It's not really a policy issue. It's more of a implementation issue, a timeline issue.
Okay. Before I proceed further, for our viewers, I would just like to say that I have been saying it's Major Rohit Gupta while it's General Rohit Gupta. I am absolutely sorry and I apologize for that. So, that's my bad, sir. Absolutely, I apologize for that. So, going forward on the discussion, Dr. Hota, coming back to you, what do you think is the next step forward? Like Mr. Prasad correctly pointed out that the policy is well intentioned. It's towards the process of liberalization. What do you think, in your opinion, should be the next steps to make it truly comprehensive and truly make changes on the ground? Because we've had these academic discussions on what the policy means. We've had editorials, but how do you envision? Because you've worked with the public sector very, very closely. How do you envision real change on the ground?
I agree with Mr. Prasad that the policies are very well intentioned and we need to execute it. For execution, it is people like us who are on the panel. Somewhere we have our own axe to grind, and it takes two to tango. For example, what General Gupta said about the army and the ecosystem in which we have operated for decades. Now suddenly we find people making a business case that it's cheaper to import it. The Indian industry is not ready for it. Now I will give you again the example of the metro. When BML, a public sector, was not there, the price of a coach used to go to 12 crores plus. When we came in, the unmanned train operation, we have come down to 6-7 crores. Now point is that there is a kind of a monopolistic situation, and even the capitalistic structure is under attack. So I would not say that it's a total panacea that you privatize it. Yes, privatization has its pluses, but there has to be a kind of an oversight. So I would say, I would take the cue from what General Gupta mentioned. If the army, which is the customer, and they take a current reality assessment of what platform they need by doing a survey across the globe, and then they look at what capacities and technological capabilities and abilities we have in the country, then they should draw up a roadmap. It should not be then tendered out and then some third fellow comes in. If together as a team you are moving forward, there has to be something in the pie for the guy who's developing the product. Otherwise nobody is going to put his money. So I think that point is very well taken. But if you have capacities created for a platform where the army needs it, And army cannot then after 6 months or 8 months change its mind. And second is the army needs to be very clear that pushing a file which goes round and round and there is no premium on time. And the business guy, he loses money when he is quoted. I mean, there have been cases where somebody quotes for some product, 2 years has gone by and they will ask for delivery date extension, delivery validity extension, 2 years. Now, there's a foreign exchange component. So we have also lost money in that. So again, to summarize, the army and the ecosystem together with the various stakeholders, today there is a healthy, what would I say, presence and the sprouting of the private sector. You have a lot of good private sector companies which are coming up together, come out with a plan, and then see that everyone gets enough work. You cannot have capacity created, as I said earlier, and not give orders. For example, in the case of BML, I would say the orders that we got in 5 years, last 5 years for defense equipments is less and a fraction of the orders that we got just this year alone.
Okay.
So can you imagine if I have invested in capacity and even though I will try unit and all that, there are certain manpower that you have. Now, if these manpower goes waste, even though we outsource, of course, there was a time when I joined the company, we had 12,000 people. Now we are having 6,000 people. But even for 6,000 people with the outsourcing, I need to give them work, and I can give them work if there's a continuous order flowing. Now I'm able to break the cycle because I have 3 business verticals. Imagine if I was only in the defense vertical, I would be dead. So the way forward is the government is very well intentioned. We need to support, and I have seen the government today, if you go and tell them these are the problems, they immediately listen to you and come with the way forward. And that is evident in the DPIIT policy public procurement 2017, followed up by various circulars, and the latest one being September of 2020. So I think that would be the way forward. And we should support the government in its Atmanirbhar mission.
Major General Gupta, you've heard both sides. And I always come back to you because you've served in the armed forces and you're now working with the private sector. So from offsets, what Dr. Hota said, what are your comments?
Before that, I would like to comment on something what Mr. Hota said, and very aptly said it.
Okay.
There has to be hand-holding in the procurement system. The military has to hold the hands of the industry in developing a project. There is no shortcut to the entire issue. And this issue of sending an RFP, giving it to the industry, expecting them to reply and produce a product. And you try it out as if you were some sort of umpires sitting on top of them. It does not work.
Right.
There has to be an interaction. There has to be a trust between both sides. You have to develop a equipment which the military wants. It is no use if the defense industry develops a product which the military does not want. It does not go hand in hand in the overall objective of leading to capability building. You can't have a test case. It's not a test paper, class 12 paper, where you given a person, you produce it, okay, you pass, very good, we buy it. If you don't pass, sorry, you're out. It doesn't work that way. The system has to have a certain level of interaction, a certain level of guidance, a certain level of hand-holding, and a certain level of producing a particular product in the development stage. For smaller products, yes, which have been picked off the market and things like that, you can do the normal RFP procedure. It doesn't work otherwise. Second issue I would like to comment upon was the offset which you asked. I have okay, before we come to the offset, Mr. Hutta gave a point about the entire issue of processing of the case. Let me say what the Comptroller Auditor General said. He noticed that there were 55 approval points across 11 different stages of procurement before a contract is signed. There are 8 different agencies which are accountable to different heads for the approval system. Yes, a certain level of cohesion has been brought in by making Deputy Chief responsible both for the revenue as well as of capital procurement. It has been realized. But yet the entire system has not synergized so that there is accountability, single point accountability system. What we must understand is that DPP came about in the wake of a problem that took place years back, colloquially known as the Elka scam. In this, the entire process of making a document was oriented towards making it more bureaucratic. A lot of knots were to be tied at each level. Checks and balances were there. There were a number of agencies which are counter-checking the process. Accountability was brought in by virtue of a number of agencies coming into being. All that, while it certainly ensures that the system will not go wrong as it went wrong a large number of years back. However, it leads to a great amount of lethargy in processing cases, where a lot of people, stakeholders, come into the system and they may, as Mr. Hotta said, grind their axe. So you have a problem there. Coming to the issue of offsets. I'll give you my personal opinion on the offsets. We've been doing this for quite some time. We've been trying out different versions of offsets, policies, changing it at all points of time. What is it today? 52 offset contracts, 11.8 billion. Out of that, only 1.6 billion have been disposed of. So there is a huge gap between what has been disposed of and what is there. What is the problem? We must understand. A foreign company knows that they will not be able to discharge the offset. Let's levy 20% more or whatever it is on the charge. If they're a single vendor, lump it off. You will have to take it if he's a single vendor and you get it at a higher price. That's the problem. That's the problem with the government is concerned. And therefore, they've taken out the offsets from the complete issues of single vendor, government to government, or the FMS procedure. They had to do it. There was no other option. In a competitive procedure, they left it there. But what is happening is that as we go less and less as buy global, you could not go to have the offset because that is only applicable in this category, not in the rest of the categories. We are losing money. We are losing money. Offsets in the Indian context is related to bringing in technology.
Yes.
Is that the only way to bring in technology? It is not brought in technology. Under no circumstances brought in technology. So what is the solution to it? Why lose money? A foreign company will not come and give you money till the time it does not get returns. So is the case in point to implement the offset in a different design in a different way. Why do we want the money only in defense? Today, you got the complete healthcare system where 2.5% of the GDP is being pumped in. There's no other option, 2.53% of the GDP. You got the water sanitization project, rural electrification, rural infrastructure, which is way back. You need money for that. Now you could have a bank of bank, Invest India, NIF platform, bank of bank. You could have discharge offsets, the money getting into that, or the Consolidated Fund of India. And the money being utilized to give it to people as an investor, to people to come and execute the project over here. The company which is investing in this side of a project either gets the dividends from the virtue of carrying out the project or by virtue of financing the project and getting back certain returns in terms of an interest.
Yes.
My point is, they are gaining by a contract in India and they want to sell the products. Please, the Elbit system, the towed gun, was sold, if I'm correct, 70 to 80 guns in the whole world. We are giving them an order of 414 or 415 guns. Why should we let the offsets go? Why should we let this money go? It is our right. Let's utilize them in areas where we need it. It need not be only for technology. Yes, technology can be one portion of it. You can have a multiplier effect in which the technology being brought in the defense is a higher multiplier. But the alternate ways where the offsets can also be dispensed with a lower multiplier. They get the returns in terms of the interest they get over there, or in terms of the contract in terms of investing, in terms of execution of a project, whichever way they wish to do so. There are large volume of companies abroad which are fund of funds themselves, where a large volume of international companies, defense companies, are funding them to come and execute projects in various areas. The models can be various. So an offset definitely needs to be there, not only for purposes of bringing in technology, but also for the purpose of a large volume of projects that we need to execute in India. We are a developing economy still, and we need the money. That's all I would like to say.
Thank you, Major General. That was very illuminating. And I go back to Mr. Prasad because I would really like to know his frank views on what his clients and what he understands is happening right now in the AeroDef sector. What do you think, Mr. Prasad? How do you think the way forward should be? Because we also need a perspective from someone who represents different private players, who understands the intricacies of policy making, and who has a fair bit of idea of how this whole thing is going on.
So I think, what does one get to hear back from one's clients? You talk about technology transfer. Until very recently, control was a major issue. With the 49% restriction, there was zero comfort on giving any technology transfer. That has started to be addressed by the government. So clients have embraced that change, the potential to go up to 74%. Defense companies have also, shown a willingness to do technology transfer if there's money on the table. You all follow the sector. You would have seen for the fighter aircraft procurement, most of the major OEMs have offered to set up production lines in India and have that technology transferred to India. So if there is money on the table, there are needs of the country being met, the technology transfer can happen. But you have to have incentives both for the Indian industry and for the foreign industry. There needs to be a certainty of order. The order book should be vast enough to justify the investment. If that happens, then the industry is more than willing to completely support the procurement exercise. So what we need really is time-bound procurements where there is light at the end of the tunnel and procurements go ahead. There have been procurements, which have been carrying on, tendered, retendered, buried, reawakened, so on and so forth. And that has, created a bit of a doom and gloom scenario, especially in the foreign industry. The Indian industry, because to the ground, has more interaction with, the powers that be. They still see, rays of light that the government wants to do something, wants to implement things, change things. But a lot of the foreign industry is, very tired of the incessant delays, and the India will sometimes tends to weaken. And I think that's what really needs to be changed. We need to have some, big ticket procurements pushed forward. You have the submarine, the helicopter, the fighter aircraft, all of which have, been in the air for the last 3-4 years with, no real action. I think that needs to change.
Okay. Thank you. I think if I were to understand all three of you correctly, I think the one commonality of point is that there needs to be some sort of interaction between the armed forces, the private players, and the government. The three sections should sit on a table, have a very frank discussion, have an umbrella organization, and work things out. Because rightly, Major General Gupta said, you simply cannot have that sort of top-down attitude where you sit and you give out this orders and you give out requirements, and then you hope that someone will build something and it will be of your it'll be of battle worthiness across the country, because we have a all three of you must know, we have a very wide country in terms of geographical terrain and climatic conditions. So the gun has to work in Ladakh, the gun has to work in Northeast, has to work in Rajasthan. So rightfully said. So before we conclude and before anything, I would just like to say, any last comments? We start with you, General Gupta.
Yeah, I would like to comment on a particular issue, which is the quality of products that we want. What is happening is, uh, look at the dilemma. I'd like to explain the dilemma which occurs in the military. You want a product. By the time the product comes in, it is 4 to 5 years. You're looking at technology 4 to 5 years ahead. If you take today's technology, which is not actually today's technology in the world over, by the time you hit the product, you get the product, you're getting something like a 10 years outdated technology. And today technology is galloping, is absolutely galloping. And everything is IT oriented. So IT is galloping. It's going under. I mean, 3 years and the thing changes. So what is the solution to the entire issue? You have a GSQR, which is pitched at a higher level. You have industry which responds to the RFI, says we can produce the product without actually knowing whether they can produce the product, and then failing in the trials because they could not produce the product as to the GSQR. It is not only the responsibility of the military to make a GSQR that fits the product that is likely to be produced. It is also the responsibility of the industry to give the input that makes the GSQR in a rational fashion. Now, this does not meet. Now, what happens is, you got a GSQR that is too much, you got a project that is being rejected, you go back a cycle of almost 5 to 10 years, and you go through the cycle again. It's happened too many times repeatedly. Yes, you got enhanced performance parameters, etc., which have been put into the DPP, but DAP, or the DPP also 2016 had it, but not been utilized. What is the solution? The solution is, if you ask for L1, you do not get a technologically advanced product because that guy does not become L1.
Yes.
So anybody who's competing is competing not for the sake of showcasing his product. He's competing to sell his product.
Right.
He will ensure that the product does not have the technology that is so expensive that he doesn't become L1. So you need a L1 T1 concept being utilized, and you have the L1 T1 concept being utilized for the first time in DAP 2020 in the system products and ICT systems for the technological systems. The first time it has been done. Now, let me explain why it was not done for the normal products. The normal products, it was not done primarily because of one reason, and this is, what is the price indexing of technology to be able to equate two products with different versions of technology or different eras of technology? What is the price indexing that can be utilized? Because anybody who's doing the price indexing is susceptible at a later stage to be said that he orchestrated the price indexing to favor a particular vendor. How unfortunate the situation is.
Absolutely, sir.
So you need a L1 T1 concept. You need faith in the system. You need professionals who handle procurement in the military. You can't have an officer coming in at the level of a director, staying there for 2 to 3 years, and then going out to another appointment, and then another one coming in and starting away again. I stayed there for 8 years. It took me 2 years to imbibe the culture of procurement. Thereafter, I could deliver. I could deliver because I knew as to what is required to be done by the system. So you need people like that. You need a L1 T1 concept. You need the people who produce it to understand as to what is the price indexing of technology, to be assisted in that kind of a manner, to produce GSQRs that are capable of it and oriented towards awarding a person who makes the best kind of a product with reasonable costing. With the reasonable costing. It doesn't mean that you get a high technology product that's outrageous thing. So therefore, an L1 T1 with percentages laid down that does not lead to outrageous costing. So that is how you will be able to resolve the problem of the GSQR imbroglio that we are in, yet get good products and not land up with products which were antedated 10 years, 15 years back.
I think what I understand is that the Moore's law of computing has really sort of set itself deeply in the defense procurement system as well, because technology is constantly being updated. You're absolutely right. Unfortunately, as time does not permit me to have a more lengthy conversation with all three of you, which has become with time all the more interesting. I would just like to say, Dr. Hota and Mr. Prasad, any last comments?
Yeah, I just want to say that, look, there has to be a primacy of purpose. The primacy of purpose here is to follow the procedures, not to be responsible for the outcomes. And it's not that we don't have a quality-based, procurement. When we award contracts to consultants, we go on the quality parameters. It is there. QSBS is there. It's allowed. But everyone wants to play it safe. And for the outdated technology, I would hold the army responsible first, because they are the customer. Yes. They have to scream. They are in a feudalistic mindset that I'm giving the order, I take 10 years to evaluate it, and 50 fellows will sign. I think that's where the problem is. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Prasad, any last comments?
Oh, no, I think all I say on a lighter note is that, the complaint of the industry is that when they get the qualitative requirements from the army or whoever, it's really an animal that doesn't exist anywhere in the world. So I think, in framing those requirements, one has to, and, I completely agree with what Major General Gupta said. They're trying to look forward 5 years because they know the procurement will take that much time. But nobody can deliver that product today. So, or respond to that request for product effectively today. So the need for the hour is for, everybody to really work together so that, the requirements of the armed forces, which are paramount, can be met.
So thank you, gentlemen. I hope that I didn't disappoint you much today. I hope we can speak in the future again, and perhaps on a different topic and on a lengthier note, and have these conversations going. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All the best.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's time now to talk about the country's largest industrial development authority that has acted as an important link between investors and the government for all investor relations. In the next segment, MIDC speaks on the special planning body's role in Maharashtra's industrial development and its key responsibilities.
Government of Maharashtra's Nodal Investment Promotion Agency, MIDC, has enabled the state to achieve undisputed leadership position in investments and industries over the last 5 decades. Presenting MIDC CEO, Dr. P. Anbalagan, in conversation with economictimes.com.
The Maharashtra Industrial Development Corporation, or MIDC, has played a stellar role in developing aerospace and defense companies in the state of Maharashtra. It has helped facilitate investment. It has developed land parcels. It has helped acquire easy capital as well. So we have with us Dr. P. Anbalagan, who is CEO of MIDC, a very senior IAS officer. I welcome you to ET AeroDef 2021, sir.
Thank you, Aditya, for this opportunity to be with ET. It's always a pleasure to interact with persons, I would say, across the table, particularly when we are in handling government affairs. And from Maharashtra and from Mumbai, the state has a lot more to offer. I think as the deliberation goes along, I think I should be able to brief and I should be able to detail it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Now, I've been having discussions with private players and retired armed forces personnel, and I will be having certainly more discussions with them. But it's a bit of a joy to directly talk with someone who's directly from the government. Not you're not a retired person from the government. You're directly right now from the seat of the government. So I'd like to ask you very broadly, sir, how is MIDC facilitating space for major defense companies or aerospace companies to develop in your state, sir? Because since you represent Maharashtra, I would concentrate only on your state today, sir.
I would say, first of all, again, namaste to all the viewers and listeners. The state has a very strong ecosystem. Before coming to Maharashtra Industrial Development Corporation, what exactly the infrastructure support we are like giving to the defense sector. I would say more on policy and also more on supply chain existence within our state. See, in Maharashtra, with like the lot of ecosystem, basically you have Nasik, Ahmednagar and Aurangabad cluster, Mumbai-Pune corridor, and of course Nagpur. These three corridors are like predominantly dominant with defense players, be it like ordnance factories, be it HAL, VRDE, or other like organizations into like defense manufacturing and research. Like I would say, organizations like or companies like Bharat Forge, even Mahindra and Mahindra, a lot of like auto and engineering hub is in this particular area. Secondly, to come with what exactly the state can offer as far as the defense sector is concerned. This state has a, I would say, the first of its kind to have its own defense manufacturing policy, with particularly offset clause in like sourcing the defense products, and most probably it ranges somewhere, but I think close to like 25 to 30% of offset is like any even overseas companies coming here need to, I would say, source whatever like percentage is being given an offset from the MOD, Ministry of Defense. The state has a very, very dominant players. And state has come up with an independent and dedicated policy on defense manufacturing, which offers host of the incentives. Like for a mega project, I would say anybody who is investing or anybody who is having an order of like 100 million USD from Ministry of Defense is given mega project status. And the land is being given at subsidized rate ranging from 50% to 70%, depending on where they invest. And second is for a common facilitation centers, common facilities, the state is also supporting, particularly for MSME cluster, it supports to 15% of the project cost in case of aerospace and defense. And even if the companies come and I think more companies come together or more MSMEs come together and form a SPV, there also the state has I would say an assistance of 15 crore or maybe 15%. And state also runs a venture capital fund. So one is for I would say Maharashtra State Industrial Cluster Development Program, which is up to 15 crore. But Maharashtra Industrial Development has corporation has created its own fund. So the initial, I would say, the contribution is 300 crore, and we have supported more than 10 companies, particularly MSMEs, where some of the companies are also going for a public issue. Like our support is like in the range of 30 to 40 crores per project, but the companies are going for an I would say in a public issue of more than 300, 400 crores. So that is what the level of, I would say, funding from the government. And this fund is also going to be, I would say, scaled up. We are aiming and we are looking at some of the like contributors. Maybe we should be able to go up to 1,000 crore for MSMEs. So any anchor unit coming there, so his vendors, captive vendors, all also can be funded through that. And maybe it's like an equity funding. And normally we get out of like 5 to 7 years of like operation we should get. Take about this Nagpur, which has a very full-fledged like maintenance, repairing and overhauling facility, MRO. So their airlines which are setting up like a global hub, also using MRO facilities, are also given a good like incentives, where any service parts, it's 100% reimbursement of state GST is given. And even for an aviation turbine fuel, you have almost almost 50% of that is being reimbursed. Come to R&D. R&D is also being supported even by like MSME or maybe an anchor units being supported. So marketing assistance for a smaller MSME is also been given. And ease of doing business, you have a lot of, I think, concern self-certification. It's most of them are engineering unit. So Maharashtra Pollution Control Board also has a policy where we have like a priority to clear that. Coming to MADC, what MADC offers for like defense clusters. So MADC, first of all, when you are qualifying as a mega unit, so you are being offered land at subsidized rate. And here, once you are qualified that you are like benchmark, particularly Nagpur, Aurangabad, you are going to qualify almost more than 100%, I would say 100% of your fixed capital investment as a qualifying investment to receive the state GST refunds. And state also includes, if you have a testing track, For example, for a vehicle, for like normally you have a testing track. So your FCA, like fixed capital investment, more up to like I would say 20% of that is also been calculated for your maximum, I would say, in benchmark investment, which can be like taken for taken to qualify as a mega project. So that way, the state has a lot many more things to offer, and land is allotted. Even any MSME, the land is allotted on priority. Even somebody invests around 10 crore, 5 crore. So this is something. That lastly, we have come up with the concept of like the plug and play infrastructure. So starting from Nagpur, we are setting up a plug and play infrastructure in 250 acres in Butiburi, which is close to next to Mihan. So any anchor unit coming, Bell has taken a land. You know, Brahmos, Bell, all the people are there around. Bell has taken a land here almost 200 acres from us. So all their captive vendors also can be accommodated where we will be giving them a ready to operate, ready to commission the built up sheds. So that like initial investment, particularly for MSME into land and also building, is being like taken care. These are given on short-term rentals. And rentals are also priced at much like less level. I would say the market rental is around 20 rupees per square feet. Then our rentals are somewhere between 9 to 12 rupees. So almost it's like a 100% discounted rentals. And during the course of the operation, the unit can also purchase and buy the property. So that way, this plug and play is given. And second, I would say the skilling part also component also we are tying up with the skill development department. Also, some of the industries are sponsoring like some very specific skill sets, particularly in Pune, Aurangabad. They have a Aurangabad like auto cluster, Nasik engineering cluster. We are coming up with a defense cluster in Nagpur. So that way, the state is taking care of like even like very minor issues to further detailing and also the financial support.
So, sir, what I understand, that was a very comprehensive review you just gave me of MIDC and its role in developing the AeroDef sector, which is absolutely necessary from not only just a manufacturing point of view, but also a strategic point of view. You know, if you look at a country as a whole. So what I understand is that Maharashtra, in my opinion, enjoys a twofold advantage, not just the manufacturing bit, but also since Mumbai is its capital, there's also the financial part of it and easy access to capital. So, sir, now I would like to ask you a very simple question. Like, it's slightly simple in its contours, but perhaps I don't know how you'd like to answer it. It's that as an IAS officer, what sort of change you have seen over the years when it comes to the real change on ground when it comes to manufacturing in India? Because you've been in the services for a long time. You've worked, you started working some decades ago, and now you are the CEO of MIDC. How have you seen, what's the real change that you have seen on the ground? So not just policies, but on the ground change, sir.
I would say like we have come, I would say very, from a very long distance of like from a permit or a licensing system to almost self-certification. Ease of doing business has taken, I would say that it has attracted the maximum attention. And government of India and India, like Republic of India, has fared very well, particularly in this past 5 years. I would say we have done phenomenally well in like World Bank ranking of ease of doing business.
Yes, sir.
When anybody comes to like be it defense, auto, or maybe food processing, or maybe textile, when you're coming for like any manufacturing, first of all is what exactly the supply chain ecosystem is existent. Whether I have, if I'm like a original equipment manufacturer, whether I have all my components can be sourced maybe to the extent of 60 to 70%. If at all I have to depend on any import, substitute imports, then whether I am close to a port, this is the first things which has. So Maharashtra, it leads in more than 10 to 12 sectors. So the state historically with the MIDC and like I would say visionary leadership from the, I would say the inception of the state has done phenomenally well to develop and nurture the matured ecosystem for most of the, I would say, components. I would say, be it auto, be it textile, be it original engineering, you would say food processing, defense, aerospace. Now you have a moving from like manufacturing to services. So even biological, bulk rack, chemicals, fertilizers. You have a like you name a section, gems and jewelry. You name a sector, the state has phenomenally done well, but it does not come in like a day or two. It has come over maybe 60 decades because of the visionary leadership. Secondly, continuity in policy. Despite the political differences, despite the change of guard, so the state continue to honor the commitments given by the earlier governments. So that is a one thing which makes the investor from maybe a neighboring state, maybe a sister state, brother state, or also from another country, puts them in much comfortable state. Second is like local partners. Particularly an overseas investor looks for a local partner to do a handholding and also do a marketing thing. So the Maharashtra scores fairly well on this component. Ease of doing business I mentioned. Third, I would say market. What exactly the market size? So the Maharashtra contributes, I would say, close to 15 to 16% of the national GDP. It contributes more than 21% of exports. If you take any sector, either we are like 1/4 or 1/5, or over some places 1/3. If you take any chemicals and bulk trucks, more than 50 to 60% are being like either manufactured or channelized through JNPT. So we have a strong port connectivity like JNPT, Digi, Jaigarh, BPT, and also close to 53 minor ports. So this support infrastructure with like continuity in policy and mature ecosystem of like supply chain vendors. For example, EV. The known world company has like 20 vendors. They declared, like if you go to like a website and search for vendors of a leading manufacturer of like EV vehicles, out of 30 vendors in India, 18 or 20 are from Maharashtra. So name a sector, be it like, I would say electric components, I would say anything on that. So that way, this system has come in long way. And finally, I would say what exactly the quality of infrastructure you are going to give them. So there comes exactly the Maharashtra Industrial Development Corporation, and which was the first organization in the country which was formed out of a statute, out of an act. It's not out of a company act or maybe anything partnership. It is out of a statute, Maharashtra Industrial Development Act 1961. So it was in inception on 1st of August 1962, close to 6 decades. We are there, Mr. Aditya. So that is where the state differs phenomenally from other, I would say, sister states, that providing the best of the infrastructure, holding a huge land parcel, 2.25 lakh acres. If I put together 3 to 4 states, even that may not match the Maharashtra's capability. And we run one of the Asia's biggest industrial water supply scheme, 2,500 MLD, and we are going for a massive expansion. We also run effluent treatment plants, more than 300 MLD capacity. We have an effluent treatment plant. We run our STPs. We run our hazardous waste treatment plant. We run our acid. You name a facility for any sector where the MADC runs it, and it's a special planning authority. It is also a joint venture partner with most of the, like, I'm a joint venture partner with Bharat Force for an SEZ to be developed at Pune. So that way, the capability, I would say, executional matrix, I would say, of the state and the MIDC is phenomenal, and it's much at, like I would say, if you can benchmark, you should benchmark me at somewhere close to 1. So that way, these were the things which have taken the state, and the long, like 60 years of in existence, has helped us to build a trust among the investors, both domestic and overseas. And I think we continue to enjoy that trust even now.
I think it will be very interesting to know what MIDC intends to do and what it has done, when it comes to aerospace and defense. And we at ET Aerospace Defense 2021 would be very excited to know about MIDC's plans. And so I give you the floor, Dr. Anbalagan. It's your floor now, sir.
Thank you so much. I think I'll have a short presentation on how Maharashtra is like aiming to achieve $1 trillion economy, of course, with the aerospace and defense sector as a thrust sectors. See, Maharashtra's, if you look at some of the statistics, it's all been, like I would say, public domain. The state has almost GDP of close to 500 billion, almost half a trillion. And it is one of the few subnational economies which are aiming to achieve $1 trillion economy. If you take even at the global level, hardly like maybe 7 or 8 subnational economies have achieved $1 trillion economy. So the state, with like 10% of the land mass, it contributes close to 16% of India's GDP. And if take off like cumulative FDI for past, I would say 2 decades, still the state occupies at the, there's like a lion's share of 30% of all the cumulative FDI which has come to the state. And manufacturing, if you say, then it contributes almost, I would say, 1/6 or 15% of the total industrial output for the country. And export, we have almost 1/5, 21%, and the best quality workforce. If you say like Maharashtra has the highest employable talent, it's at 68%, and it has a robust network of engineering and technology colleges, more than 710. If you look at the infrastructure network, we have 3 international and 13 domestic airports and 2 major and 53 minor ports with largest power supply capacity. And the state has a very decent and high per capita income. The state is leading the country with huge investment in the infrastructure. If you can see the numbers, almost more than 30 plus mega projects are happening. To name a few, the metro projects in Mumbai, Pune, Nagpur, and recently also the Nasik is also been announced. Secondly, the coastal road, Mumbai coastal road, and Maharashtra Samriddhi Mahamarg, which is going to connect Nagpur with Mumbai, is going to be commissioned up to like Sirdi, maybe in the month of May. And the state is a part of Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor with one city, Arik, is already commissioned. It's a smart city with 10,000 acres. And the Digi Mangaon high-tech city is going to come almost, we have 15,000 acres. So if you see like investment is more than 40 billion investment and close to 40% of the population, almost 48 million and 4.8 crore population is impacted. Here comes Maharashtra Industrial Development Corporation, which is like premier industrial development corporation of the state. Of course, it's one of the leading and one of the largest IDC of the country. It has phenomenal, you can see it aggregates land and it operates industrial estates at 289 places, and it holds quite a chunk of land, almost 2.5 lakh acres of industrial estates. The state, the MIDC also runs a sector specific parks. You have chemical parks, Balrak Park, you have like horticulture park, silver park, wine park. It has a more like IT parks and also IT SEZ. If you come like to a chemical sector, we have a dedicated chemical zones. MIDC also operates common effluent treatment plants, and their capacity is being like almost doubled in another 5 years. And state has invested phenomenally, I would say, high quantum of investment for upgrading the environmental infrastructure. Another like 3 years, the state is going to pump in another 4,000 crore to have a marine outfall. For all the treated effluent, you'll have an acid recovery plant, you have a solvent recovery plant, you have a common hazardous waste treatment plant, you have a ZLD, multiple. So it is going to be like on track. And it runs one of the largest supply of like industrial water supply in that. And there's a dedicated Japanese cluster in Supa Amanagar. So come to like defense and aerospace, I think we should say what exactly the ecosystem and policy support the state is offering. We think of like infrastructure and connectivity, the state scores very best when they come to like land, electricity and water. And whereas connectivity, you say ports, railways, airports and roads. If you come to sector overview, or maybe if you come to like a FDI destination, think of the numbers actually. So, but there is a long way to go. There's a long way to go. So, if you have like share in GDP, I would say, though the numbers are like very humble, but we have a lower scope to move on. So, you can see like more than like 21% of other like transport equipment, including aircraft, ships, boats, all in that I think NIC 30 category. And if you come to like ammunition, also its state is contributing close to 30%. If you take up parts, particularly you say ships, boats, and floating structures, close to 42% is the state's contribution. Talent availability, say the state enrolls one of the highest number of like students, technical and non-technical. So 1.6 million students are being enrolled every year, and it has a highest talent pool employable 68%. And think of R&D facilities for I would say defense and aerospace. You have a clusters and associations for knowledge exchanges all there. FDI, I think we do contribute 14% for that, and also priority land allotment is given for all the FDI investors. And you have a dedicated defense hubs. Think of like Pune, Nagpur, Nasik, Aurangabad, Ahmednagar, and Nagpur is developed as like a aerospace cluster. And you have an organization from DRDO, and also BRD in Amarnagar. And as far as policy is concerned, I would say really the policy has taken care of almost all the requirements of the industry, and it has its own policy. And it has some fiscal incentives for anchor units, mega projects, and also for MSMEs. So you have a large players like particularly in Pune, you have like Tata, Reliance, L&T, HAL, Bharat Forge, and you have an emerging hubs at Nagpur with companies like Boeing, Solar Industries, and BrahMos are already taken land, and also Bell has also taken a land. And even go to place like I would say Amravati, some defense companies have taken already land, of course, public sector undertakings. So existing clusters, where exactly the scope, where the new investor can invest, we can think of this triangle of Nasik, Aurangabad, Ahmednagar. Nasik has a HAL, and Aurangabad you have a cotton grapes and most of the engineering and auto companies. And Ahmednagar has VRD, where like every vehicle needs to be tested. It's like a VRD, Vehicle Research and Development Establishment. And DRDO also has a laboratory in Ahmednagar. Come to Pune, it's major defense institutes. Think of like both for an indigenous development and also for combat engineering, and also have laboratories and training research institute from DRDO. You also have a defense institute for like advanced technology, and of course NDA is there in Pune. And ordnance factories, the more number of ordnance factories there in Maharashtra and also in region of Pune, and even I would say Bhusawal, these places. And private sector players I mentioned like Bharat Forge, Mahindra, Tata, and also L&T. And you have an associated clusters for defense equipment manufacturer. Nagpur like is being developed as MRO and also an aerospace hub where Tata Tal has its like unit, and Solar Industries and BrahMos also have the unit. Recently, you know, like Reliance is also like developing a Dhirubhai Ambani Aerospace Park in Nihan, and it has a like Vidarbha Defense Industrial Hub and Cluster. We are also aiming to have another cluster where like Vidarbha Industrial Association and also Tatas are going to be part of that. It's going to be more of a common facility. So with all that, it's strongly emerging as a strong center for MRI activities and also for aircraft manufacturing. So this aerospace and defense manufacturing policy, what exactly it's offering? So it's close to like its aiming is what exactly the investment? It should be at roughly close to around 2 to 2.5 billion by 2024. And also we should be able to attract a lakh employment. The state has various incentives for mega projects, and if you are like traditional manufacturing, to qualify mega project, you need to invest somewhere between 1,000 to like 7,500 crore. But in case of even in A and B like Pune and even Mumbai, if you invest 250 crores or if you have 500 employment, you are qualified as mega project. And if a minimum, in case of other rest of the places, only 100 crores. So you are getting all the benefits which are otherwise given to a unit which is investing 1,000 crores. So the benchmark investment is also been reduced. And you have a lot of thing in that. Basically, even the test range is also been included as a component for eligible investment. And also there is a concession for water, and also service charges are being in waiver. We're also planning to set up a manufacturing hub in, I would say, Nagpur, where you would like to get like electricity duty exemption and electricity tariff concession. Anchor units will get a land at subsidized rate. Only thing is they have to get maybe an assured order of $100 million US from MOD. And it has like from 50 to 70% of the concession is given. And of course, there you'll get a more like 100% of the GST is being given. Common, I would say, the facilities, particularly for prototyping, manufacturing, and also R&D, and also like I would say standardization, benchmarking. It's also been assisted. The state runs a venture capital fund, one for like common facility and another for an equity investment. So the MIDC runs a fund with like 300 crore initial like venture capital, and we are going to scale up to 1,000 crore. We have already funded more than 10 units. They're phenomenally doing well. So promotion of Nagpur, we all know as a major like maintenance repair and overall MRO agent for aircrafts. So there also it's being promoted because you are going to get 50% of reimbursement of VAT on aviation turbine fuel, and wherever like service parts are being sourced locally, so you are getting 100% of the GST, state GST refund. The policy also a component for R&D and also marketing assistance, and MPCB and MDC has taken a lot of initiative also for these business. I think these are the players, fans with us. We have shown us that, I would say, and having a great trust on us with Maharashtra. I think with this, I would end with the note that I think the state is, I would say, an anchor manufacturing hub for most of the, I would say, an industrial sector, and it's also there for defense and aerospace. So I request all the investors to show the trust in Maharashtra, and we are there to assist and we grow together. Jai Hind, Jai Maharashtra.
Thank you, sir. I would not like to, keep on rambling and ask you questions which you have already answered. To sort of end this discussion, I would just say that I hope I can have these conversations with you again. I hope I can have conversations like these with senior IS officers from other states and get their view on defense and aerospace manufacturing. And perhaps together we can sit sometime and, exchange views on how exactly India can progress as a manufacturing nation of items of strategic importance. I thank you for your time, sir. And I just like to mention as an anecdote, sir, that whenever I speak to private players, and anyone can go to the MIDC website and look at those private players. I don't want to take names. There are a lot of defense players who are already operating in Maharashtra under the guidance of MIDC. So it's nice that things are moving ahead, because as someone who covers defense or looks at defense, it's heartening to see that we are finally doing the Make in India. We are finally making things for India in India, and we are not really going to be depending on foreign imports for years to come. So I thank you for your contribution to the country, sir, in that matter.
And also at the outset, I would like to express my sincere gratitude for ET to make the state of Maharashtra and also MIDC part of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Last but not the least, as we draw towards the last segment of the ET AeroDef 2021, let's hear from our esteemed panel of experts on what they think about government initiatives like the Defense Innovation Fund, DIF, and the Innovations for Defense Excellence, IDEX, in strengthening India's next generation platforms, and why innovation and technology hold the key to the future of Indian defense.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to AeroDef 2021. We have with us a host of eminent personalities to discuss the future of defense systems in India, and also innovation and how it's going to impact the Indian defense landscape. And I'd be very honored to introduce the three panelists. We have with us Commodore Anil Jay Singh from the Indian Navy. He is Senior Vice President, Thyssen Group Marine Service Systems. We have Mr. Ratan Srivastav, Aerospace and Defense Expert and MD, Power Group Asia. He represents the Indian company. We have with us Mr. Abhishek Verma, Partner and Lead Aerospace and Defense, KPMG. So we have a very esteemed team of panelists, and we hope that we can have some illuminating discussions about where IDEX is going, where the Indian landscape is developing in terms of innovation, because we've already had a talk about the Atmanirbhar Abhiyan. So let's have a discussion on this now. So let me start with you, Commodore. What do you think in today's terms? You've served in the forces, and now you're in the private sector. How do you suppose things have evolved over the years in terms of innovation, in terms of developing indigenous technologies? How do you think they've evolved over the years? Because you've seen both sides of the divide.
Innovation is actually a continuum. If you really take the last 100 years, warfare has gone from being, we've gone from the age of sail to steam. We've gone the underwater domain with the U-boats, and thereafter in the air, then space. So it's a continuum. And I think now with technology having reached where it has, more and more focus is coming on autonomous technologies, disruptive technologies, which are cheaper and more effective, depending on who's the first mover there. So I think from that perspective, if you see, warfare is going to evolve very much faster. The power of computing, the rate at which the power of computing is doubling and trebling and quadrupling, is far more rapid than it ever has before. And therefore, all these applications are going to be upon us much sooner than we expect. There was a time when defense drove innovation. I think times have changed. Now it's commercial applications drive innovation and military applications follow. So if you look at it from that perspective, I think in the next 5 or 10 years, we'll see a tremendous amount of innovation happening in the autonomous sector and in disruptive technologies, whether it's artificial intelligence, machine learning, surveillance, the elements of space and cyber, which will open up, which has made everything as it is so very transparent. The surface of the sea has become so transparent now that I don't think those huge carrier battle groups of yesteryears can now operate at sea, anywhere in the sea, without being detected or monitored. So it's going to be a very different sort of warfare we're going to go into. However, I would still think that these technologies are still at a stage where they need to mature before they become really the raison d'etre of military forces. So I would say for the next at least few years, I wouldn't like to put a timeline to that, but for the next few years, I think these will remain very effective force multipliers if used well, and if we can keep pace with technology. And often I give this argument. Last year I was at a seminar in Stockholm where this discussion was on unmanned ships.
Right.
It was on defense technologies, that how soon will we be seeing unmanned ships fighting wars at sea? We already have a lot of unmanned technologies at sea. Minesweeping has become fairly unmanned. You've taken the man out of the loop. Now you have unmanned surface vessels, you have unmanned underwater vehicles, you have all kinds of things. But while all that is happening, countries are still investing a lot of money in hardcore military hardware. Yes. Proper manned, powerful platforms, aircraft carriers. I mean, on the one hand, China talks about its sharp power, but it is also investing in aircraft carriers. It's not that it's not doing that, because ultimately, like in the infantry, they say you need boots on ground. Well, even at sea, you need presence. That presence comes from large platforms. That presence comes from that ability to project power. We still haven't reached a stage where autonomous technologies can project that kind of power. So this will be a slow process before the man in the loop can be totally taken out of the battle space. But I think as a force multiplier, there's tremendous amount of potential. Countries are tapping this in a big way. I think India has been, we have our limitations in how soon we can absorb these technologies, how many resources, how much of resources can we devote to developing these technologies. But I think what I see now is this, while we are talking about Atmanirbharta as a concept, we are also very clear this Atmanirbharta is not going to come all from within. We have to get people on board from outside, people who have these technologies. The recent discussions with the, the Quad discussion took place. The US Defense Secretary was here till yesterday. They all talked about artificial intelligence, cyber warfare, space. These are the new frontiers. And the sooner we are able to synergize our efforts with those of like-minded countries, the more we'll be able to achieve. So I think in this continuum of warfare that is going to emerge over the next few years, disruptive technologies, innovation is going to play a very, very large role.
I think you raised two very excellent points, sir. One being that earlier it was defense that led to innovation. We've seen that through 19th and 20th century. It was always the defense thing that led to commercial applications, from the internet to drones to everything. And now it's slightly the other way around. It's slightly shifting its axis. We see commercial applications bringing in a lead, and then we see defense things getting developed. And the second point you raised was very similar to what the IAF chief also raised, that these can be force multipliers, not necessarily the main combatants.
The force, so to say.
Multipliers, like from drones to space satellites that we're developing, space weapons. So, Mr. Srivastav, I come to you. What do you think, as someone who's probably quite familiar with emerging technologies and how space is now being developed as the new battleground? How do you see the next, let's say, 3 decades in India when it comes to defense innovation and defense development?
So thank you, Aditya. Aegis sir has actually shed a lot of light, giving you a background of how it was and how we are today and where we could possibly be. So taking on that, and as he said, that innovation is a continuum. So innovation is a continuum. Definitely, it's a continuum. Yes. So we've seen in the last century, the last war that we fought in 1999, the Kargil War, We did not see anything happening in terms of artificial intelligence, cyber warfare. We did not have even the fourth dimension of space. I mean, we know very well that we needed to get the coordinates, geo coordinates. We couldn't get those geo coordinates, for want of a better word. I'm just saying geo coordinates because we can't get too technical over here. So that led to India deciding that we need to develop this technology ourselves, right? So this is the kind of, I would say, imperative that was there to develop technologies. So what we did just about 20 years back is not relevant today. So what we could be possibly doing 20 years from now, we can only predict. We cannot say, how things will turn out. But definitely, this led to the need for developing these technologies in-house, so we are not dependent upon anybody else to get any help that we need. So whether we are talking in terms of the navigation systems, or we're talking in terms of the surveillance systems, or we're talking in terms of the communication systems, all in the space, I would say the fourth dimension, everything has moved very, very fast in the last few years, and not without the help of, I would say, innovation that was driven by ISRO, but also with partnership in the private and the public sector, both the private and the public sector. I'm very happy to say that the innovations which are coming are primarily coming from the young lot, which has an ISRO background, more often than not an ISRO background, and they have moved out of ISRO for challenging the, let's say, the old guard, but they have a mindset which is ISRO trained. So whether it is in terms of, let's say, even using a mobile phone as a satellite phone, that technology exists with us, for example, today. Whether it is in terms of microsatellites and small satellites, which can become a constellation and therefore provide you with real-time intelligence, or it is in terms of large satellites, which is the IRNSS, which has been developed in partnership with the private sector. But what I'm trying to say here is this, that most innovation and the IP still rests with ISRO. They are only helping, taking help from the private sector and the public sector to, let's say, manufacture faster. Or that's what I could say. The design development still is with ISRO, which is good, because that is what a space agency should be doing. They should be doing design, development, innovation, and obviously with the help of the private sector. Having said this, what we need to understand is this, that we are still far behind in rocketry. I mean, we have the PSLV, we have the GSLV, but we really need to have rockets which could take smaller satellites. I mean, if I don't have, let's say, 100 kilograms to be put in space, I have only 500 kilograms. I should have a rocket for that. And I should be able to assemble it quickly, and it should be cheaper. And it should be able to be launched at will, right? It should be a bespoke thing. So that's something we still need to work on. And in that, the private sector is doing a lot of work. And as we move forward, there's a trend towards moving green as well. So green fuels, and obviously to stay in space, you need solar energy, right? So because that's the way the batteries would be charged for satellites, and you basically have a 10-year or a 15-year life for a satellite. How can we increase that life of a satellite, right? Because there's only finite space in the space, so-called, right? Where you can dump all these satellites. So one day, you have to ensure that there's some place to park them as well, right? So you cannot just keep on sending satellites after satellites after satellites. So we need to understand how are we going to increase the life of satellite, or how we could even move those satellites from one orbit to another orbit. So these are, I think, technologies which should be developed in the next few years to come.
Okay, so what I understand, Mr. Srivastav, is that I think you would also argue that it's time that India takes on a position which is very similar to what the US has done when it comes to space exploration. I mean, they have the NASA, and they also have they have Musk, and they have Bezos of the world trying to, do something. And I'm sure that civilian application also comes in handy with defense applications, in the US. I think something similar of that sort could be done in India as well,
Yes, so that's what I'm trying to say. So this in the rocketry, for example, there is a lot of work being done in the private sector and in the startups, primarily in the startups. So we have, I mean, there's no point taking names over here.
Right.
If you take one, the other guy will say, "Why not me? I've also been doing this." But then I can tell you this, that in rocketry, yes, we are having a lot of innovation in terms of smaller rockets, more efficient rockets, and cheaper rockets, and all this is being done in the uh, I would say startup segment, and in the segment which is funded by PEs and VCs. But a lot of mentoring is still being done by titans from ISRO. But obviously, the driver's seat is with the younger lot, and which is very good.
Hmm. That's good. Mr. Verma, I come to you. You are from KPMG. You head the aerospace and defense sector there. And I'm sure you interact with both government and private players. So when we talk all of this, when we talk about all of these things such as innovation, we talk about a broad topic such as innovation, which is very broad, and we talk about IDEX and we talk about all these things. What do you see is happening on ground? Because you would really be talking to the sort of people who are actually working on ground, who actually know what's happening and how different reality is from a policy that comes out and how it's being implemented. So your views on that, sir?
Sure, right. I mean, that's a very pertinent question. Uh, and I feel a bit of privileged, that I can see both sides of the coin. That, we sit sometimes on the government side trying to facilitate investment into corridors, coming out with right policies for the private players. And on the other hand, many a times we are making strategies for these private players who want to either enter defense or space sector, or an existing player wants to diversify. And more importantly, a lot of foreign players also want to come and establish shop in India.
Yes.
So it's a very privileged position, I must say, that I see both sides of the coin, and if we are in a position to help these players as well as the regulators to set up the right environment, it is a great thing for the country to do. Uh, Coming to the point you mentioned, yes, you know the past few years, I must say, when I say defense, past few years, and when I say space, past few months have been very, very interesting for the private players. Since Ratan sir just covered space, let me just extend that a bit before coming to defense. So in space, very interesting thing which happened is the draft Spacecom policy. Now, I can speak because these plans are now public. Earlier, I could not speak because I was the consultant with NSIL and ISRO. There is an RFP as we speak today out for inviting private participants to come and integrate the PSLV rocket itself, and which will be followed by integration of the smaller launch vehicle, which is called SSLV. And it might extend to even bigger vehicles. And with SSLV, ISRO has already said they even want to uh, let private players design it. In PSLV, the design, everything will be given on a platter and they'll only be integrating it. But in SSLV and another rocket, there'll be far more freedom given to private sector. Add on top of that the new Spacecom policy. Now that has brought the fundamental change. First time in India, you are allowed to own your own space asset. Before that, you could hire the transponder in a ISRO satellite and provide your services. Now you can own your own space assets, make your own space stations, and use ISRO's facility to launch your own rockets. So once this policy comes into full force, the space sector is totally going to be opened up to the private players. Uh, Currently, ISRO is setting up in space to be the very to be put in the right regulator to facilitate the use of ISRO assets for private player. And I've personally met a lot of ISRO officials, seen the way they are going, two steps ahead to welcome these space startups and handhold them. So that has been the very encouraging development. But at the same time, the challenges in the space sector with the new entrepreneurs face is less from the government side, more from the funding side. And Ratan sir would agree with me because these are new space models. For example, again, without taking the name, there's a guy who's printing 3D, he was 3D printing the cryogenic engine. There's another guy who is doing electric propulsion system for satellites, because once satellites go, they carry a lot of fuel to change the orbits. So with these kinds of business models, they are not proven in the market. So the funding becomes a major challenge. So these are the kinds of challenges. Regulatory side, government side, the barriers are coming down. Hand holding is going a level up. Market side, yes, they still need a lot of funding and support. So that's been the challenge. Coming to the defense side, we have seen the new DAP, the negative list, a lot of support to the Indian ecosystem, and I'm very happy. IDEX is the right step in this direction. Although we are yet to see those big orders flowing to IDEX players. These are early days, but I'm very happy to see the recent 20 million order to an Indian startup to provide the switch UAVs.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that proves that the defense forces, the government is serious towards looping in the Indian defense sector startups. And I mean, we all know startups need a few level more support all around, whether it's from funding to technology to regulations. And that's why we see almost 30% of startups in defense are today from Bangalore, because the ecosystem is already there, and not from other places. But with that, the point I want to summarize here, that yes, the barriers have come down both in space and defense side from government side. There's a lot of hand holding support available. Market is also catching up. So the overall the sector for a startup is really exciting, and this is the right time to be as a startup in this domain. Thank you.
No, I completely agree with you. The point, and I see a sort of wave of optimism between all three panelists, today, in the sense that you all agree that there has been some policy change, there has been some hand holding, and the government is, in its own, the way the bureaucracy functions, you can't really change that overnight. In its own way, it's just trying to pick up pace with new ideas and new startups and new private players. Commodore Singh, I come to you, and I have two questions for you. One of them being that since you are also a part of the private player system now, how would you see over the years? How would you see that acquisitions have taken place? How would you see that the time frame has changed? Would you say the time frame has decreased? Would you say things have become smoother? Would you say for instance, that the Indian Navy is now more actively pursuing domestic private players than before? And my second question, of course, which you can answer later, is about the sphere of influence that India now has. It touches till Maldives. It's almost till Horn of Africa. So where does that where does the Indian naval domestic systems come into place?
Okay, so I'll take the first question. The Navy has always been at the forefront in encouraging defense indigenization. Much before we had the Make in India and the Atmanirbhar Bharat, we were building all our ships in India. Even presently, the 41 ships or 42 ships and submarines that are on order are all being built in Indian shipyards. Now, that's a very creditable initiative that the Navy took and was willing to see the few setbacks in its programs, see a few setbacks in the quality of the ships, but they persisted with it. As a result of which, we are now in a fairly comfortable state insofar as shipbuilding is concerned.
Right.
The problem is that the Indian Navy's requirement of force level requirement is much more than our shipbuilding capacity at the moment in the country. And therefore, the odd ship that we have to go and import is happening because of that, not because we can't build it. This is where I would say the MOD has not been able to deliver on this front. There were some very good private shipyards which came up in about 10 years ago. And at that point of time, had the right enabling environment been created by the MOD with those shipyards, and they were state of the art, whether it was Pipavav, whether it was Bharti, ABG, they were of different sizes, different scales, but they all had excellent state-of-the-art machinery, state-of-the-art technology. L&T's shipyard, which is there at the moment, where they are hoping to build future warships. Now, all these came up. These would have been great, they would have greatly added to our shipbuilding capacity. However, the MOD, in its efforts to protect its own PSU shipyards, the 4 of them, created such an unequal spirit of competition that all these shipyards, in their desperate bid to get orders, just fell by the wayside because they couldn't sustain their shipbuilding. Pipavav was packed up, ABG is packed up, Bharti is packed up, and I'm sure L&T would have packed up if it didn't have the L&T name behind it. You know, if it didn't have the L&T resources and the L&T name behind it, that would have also gone the same way. Just to give you an idea, as of last year, the 4 government shipyards, and okay, if you take Cochin shipyard as the 5th, though that's a Ministry of Shipping shipyard, not a DPSU, had a confirmed order book of 180,000 crores for ships and submarines. And the complete private shipyard ecosystem in India had an order book of less than 5,000 crores. Now, the total output revenue-wise, and Abhishek probably will be able to shed some light on this, I think is not more than 12 to 15,000 crores of the public sector shipyards, which means that they already have a confirmed order book for the next 15 years or 10 years. However, despite that, we did not encourage the private shipyards to deliver. The private shipyards, I worked with Pipavav also for 3 years. Initially, when I soon after I left the Navy, I was looking after setup in Delhi. I was not there at the shipyard, but I was watching it very closely. And it was a very ambitious shipyard. It had great plans for the country. It had a great vision, largest shipyard in the country, largest dry dock in the world, and et cetera, et cetera. Notwithstanding that, where they went wrong, I think, was in trying to get too ambitious. And at that point of time, someone should have told them that, look, you temper your ambition. We'll give you we'll create a process by which you can slowly, ramp up your capability. For example, I'll just give you one example. Now it can be told: the 15 Bravo destroyer, which is being built by Mazagon Docks. Pipavav wanted to build the 15 Bravo destroyer.
Okay.
Nobody was going to give Pipavav a 15 Bravo destroyer, the most sophisticated warship being built in India. So had Pipavav at that time said, okay, I'll do the hull. I'm very good at hull fabrication. Let me start with the hull. Let Mazagon Docks do the integration. It would have been a sort of gradual, incremental process, and things would have moved better. So that is one part of it. Coming to whether things have improved, things have definitely improved, but timelines have not changed. We still take 7 years to build a destroyer. We were taking 7 years a few years ago. Our Project 75 program is 3 submarines in 17 years is just not an acceptable speed of construction. So I'm afraid that we have not really improved the pace of production in our shipyards, because we still have not been able to either expand them or adopt the best practices, or really, make them technologically so savvy that they can compete with the world's best. And therefore, we will find that for the next few years, we will not be able to keep pace with what we would like to have. 3 years ago, the Chief of Naval Staff said he wants a 200-ship Navy by 2027. Now, the present Chief of Naval Staff saying, I'll be happy with 175 ships by 2032. And this is going to slip further as we move on. So we've got to be careful about, we have to create an environment. And when I say that, I don't mean you hold hand or you sort of give preferential treatment to the private shipyards, but create a level playing field and create the enabling environment. And, it can be said now, but at a particular conference many years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, one gentleman who's a fairly well-known name in defense industry circles actually said to the Secretary of Defense Production, sir, you are the Secretary of Defense Production of India, not defense production of DPSUs. It almost came down to that. So till we don't have that sort of ecosystem functioning, we are going to find it difficult. But yes, there are definitely changes. The new DAP, as Abhishek mentioned, has offered far more opportunities for the private players. Private players were consulted before the DAP was finalized. Finally, it was a document that came out from the MOD, but at least viewpoints were taken. That is a very positive development anyway over the years. Earlier, it was something that, nobody wanted to talk to industry. So that's one part of it. Secondly, coming to your second question of sphere of influence, maritime domain awareness.
Yes.
Let me start from saying that the Indo-Pacific is now India's larger area of responsibility. And that's a huge area of responsibility. It starts from Djibouti on the Horn of Africa on the west and goes right to the Western Pacific on the east. Obviously, India does not have the capacity or the capability to surveil this whole area, and neither does any other navy except perhaps the US Navy to some extent. China is very much a player. It's the elephant in the room, and it's got, it's expanding its navy at a phenomenal rate. And its intention ultimately is it's already dominating the South China Sea. Its intention is to come into the Indian Ocean and dominate that in the next 5 or 10 years as part of its overall plan for global domination. So if India has to counter this Chinese effort, at the moment, the Indian Navy is more than a match for the Chinese Navy in the Indian Ocean. And China will not try any adventurism in the Indian Ocean for the next few years till they know that the Indian Navy is far, far superior in terms of what it can do in the Indian Ocean. Though numerically, now the Chinese Navy is the largest Navy in the world. They're building 20 to 25 major warships every year. We have built 25 warships in the last 18 years. That's the sort of difference. So in another 10 years from now, the Chinese Navy will be a very, very formidable presence in the Indian Ocean. We have to be prepared for that. Our plans have to be catered for what we would like to be in 2035 and not what we would like now. And that is where comes the debate of that famous third aircraft carrier. That the Navy wants a third aircraft carrier. The Navy, that's all we keep hearing about, how the Navy wants a third aircraft carrier. And my argument is the Navy does not want a third aircraft carrier. If you want the Navy to do what the Navy should do, if India is to be a big power in the region, then India needs a third aircraft carrier. It is India which needs a third aircraft carrier, not Navy wants a third aircraft carrier. So that argument should be put aside. So we have to decide, do we want it? Because if today we decide to go for a third aircraft carrier, that aircraft carrier will get commissioned 10 to 12 years from now. That's the time so we cannot at that time say, oh God, I wish we had a third aircraft carrier. Let's get a third aircraft carrier. It won't come from anywhere. It's not something you can build overnight. So that naval capability enhancement or augmentation has to be thought out over a long period of time. Budgets have to be given. The naval budget has actually, instead of increasing every year, been reducing in terms of percentage of defense budget. From 18%, it's come down to 14%. This currently is again gone up, I think, to about between 15.5 and 16%, which is an encouraging trend. So it is very important that India is able to secure its complete maritime neighborhood, its so-called strategic maritime space. That means right up to Maldives, Mauritius, Eastern Indian Ocean, partly Southern Indian Ocean, Western Indian Ocean. We have huge interest in the Gulf. A lot of our diaspora works there. Our oil comes from there. In the East, so much of our trade, we trade so much with the East. We know the Chinese are going to come from eastwards. So we have to be very, very, very vigilant in this part of the ocean. And that is where we come into the aspect of maritime domain awareness. And that is where I think we are trying to ramp up our capability pretty rapidly. We have a dedicated satellite now. We have the P-8I aircraft. We are going in for the American drones, the Sea Guardians. So, and the Chief of Naval Staff at his last press conference very clearly said that underwater domain awareness is a very high priority for him, because that is where the action is going to be. You see the Chinese, they're coming with the research ships, their sea wind drones, they're regularly using those to understand and map the oceans, because that is going to influence how submarines can operate. So if in the Indian Ocean, the Indian Navy has a better understanding of the Indian Ocean than your adversary, you can deploy your submarines far more effectively and counter his anti-submarine warfare forces far more effectively. But if you allow him to also have the same amount of knowledge of the underwater domain, then you've lost that fundamental advantage. Right. So that is why it is very important that our own underwater domain awareness, whether we do it through underwater drones, or we do it through unmanned technologies, or we do it through sonars, or we do it through research, we need to build up a lot of capability in our underwater domain awareness and our overall maritime domain awareness to be able to dominate the Indian Ocean and not allow anyone else to know as much about the Indian Ocean as we know about it. Because everything, the oceans are a very strange place. Anything below the surface affects everything. For example, the temperature profile below the waterline can be different on different days of the same week. So you could be operating in the same place, but you could find a totally different temperature profile, which will affect the sound velocity, which will affect the detection ranges, which will affect everything. So you've got to have an understanding. I commissioned a submarine in the Soviet Union in 1985, the Sindhu Ghosh. When we were taking the submarine, they handed over to us a document called Okean. It was about world oceans. I forget the Russian name now. It had mapped every ocean for every day of the year. The temperature profile over 100 years, the pressure profile over 100 years, the salinity profile over 100 years, complete ocean of the world had been mapped. And that document they gave to us. It was a normal book. It was something like the Times Atlas, huge, thick volume. But I mean, that is the sort of effort that's required if you really want to be a global navy operating anywhere in the world and dominating the waters. So I think from that perspective, India has to build up its underwater domain awareness. It has to build up its underwater detection capability. It has to build up its underwater armament capability with underwater drones. So we are heading there, but we need to do it much faster. And that is where I think this whole concept of quad and of working together with other navies is very, very useful. And that is why these foundational agreements, I know they came in for a lot of criticism that, we are selling out to the Americans and it's all suiting the Americans. It may suit the Americans in terms of their ability to contain China and, with India's help, but it's also helping us a great deal. We would never have been able to reach where we will now be able to reach with help from them and their technology. So I think it's equally mutually beneficial to both of us. So from that perspective, I think the Indian Navy is doing well, but we need to do a little more. There's no doubt about that.
I think, sir, that was an excellent summarization of the threats that we are going to face in the coming future, and the necessity of India speedily developing its naval assets. I think that was an excellent, absolutely thought-provoking little 2 bits that you gave us. Now, Mr. Srivastav, before we wrap this up, I would really like to know that what are your suggestions to the Ministry of Defense or to the government in general, because it's just not the Ministry of Defense, it's also the space, systems that, you take care of, you look at. So I would just like to know what your final comments would be on how the government can improve, because hopefully these conversations, hopefully these ideas can sort of reach the right people, and perhaps there can be a shift in thinking. And with people like you, there perhaps can be a very specific sort of an idea that can reach them. So, if you could give in your 2 bits.
So thank you, Aditya. And, I can talk about space and maybe, I'll share the, the space here with Abhishek to talk about defense, because it would be fair that, we divide our work. So having said that, in the space, the government has been proactive. If you just look back 10 years, the industry was just a vendor. They didn't even know, for example, if somebody was making PCBs, he wouldn't even know in which module it will go. They just got a design and they manufactured and they gave it to them. That's it, right? Nothing more, right? And as Abhishek just now said, that he KPMG worked with NSIL and ISRO to develop the RFPs which are coming out. Now, those RFP are coming out right now for the integration of the polar launch vehicle, not the GSLV, for example, right? Now, in that, the word is integration, right? So the design is there, the manufacturing, is already being done. 90% of the PSLV is already being manufactured in the private sector. So today they are moving up from being a vendor, just a vendor, to a partner, right? Quote unquote, a partner. So when they are a partner, then they are working in more close coordination with the ISRO and its teams to integrate the system, but still they are not designing the system. Now the SSLV, or the small launch vehicle, that has been designed, actually, it's already been designed to a great extent by one of the labs, right? So LVSC has done that. So what we are saying is this, that in this, the private sector has actually worked in very close coordination on the design aspect as well, right? So that they do not have supply chain challenges that are today there in the other vehicles, in the larger vehicles, because we are not able to integrate the larger vehicles quickly or send off as quickly as we would like to, primarily because of supply chain challenges, because the order book is not as big as it is in defense, for example. So the budget is not there. Therefore, a small company cannot just survive only on doing space manufacturing. They have to do other things as well. I mean, there's so many companies in. There's no point taking the names, but they are working in defense, they are working in aerospace, and they're also working in space segment, because they are adjacent technologies. In a lot of ways, they are adjacent technologies. For example, an argument can be made that the small launch vehicle could also be moderated to use as a missile, right? So that argument is there, but thankfully we have signed the MPCR, so we are not, we have signed a lot of international agreements and we are compliant with them. So I would say that in space, the Department of Space and the Prime Minister's office, in my time when I was with Picky as an advisor in space, we have seen they are proactive and they want industry to be interwoven into the ISRO, I would say, ecosystem. And they have more than, I would say, more than encouraged it. As the policy changes have happened, and Abhishek talked about the recent policy changes that have happened, and the recent encouragement on the policy side for startups to even work. The Prime Minister, addressed the space startups some time back, as you may be aware. That is the kind of support which is being given. But funding, yes, funding is a huge challenge because this is an unknown area, and the returns will be coming when we don't know, right? So you talked in the beginning about Elon Musk, and you talked about Bezos. Bezos has not made a penny till now.
Yeah.
Right?
And he's funding it from his own money, selling stock and funding it.
Selling stock and funding it, right?
Yeah.
And Elon Musk burnt so much cash before he could even. I mean, one of the reasons that Tesla had to go public was because he was burning so much cash, right? But unfortunately, we do not have that kind of luxury in India today. But there's a lot of funding which is happening, especially in the Bangalore, I would say, in and around Bangalore, by private sector. I mean, even I would say people are just not who are just not, I would say, be a part of the space. They are from, let's say, a biotech company founder is investing in space. So that kind of help is being given. But again, it's so Bangalore centric, right? Or it is so Trivandrum centric, Thiruvananthapuram centric. This has to move out. And as Sir said, AJ Sir just said, they are making 25 ships in a year. We made 25 in 18 years. Similarly, the capacity constraint is there in space manufacturing as well, right? And the cash has to come from the private sector. So if we have to move forward in a manner that the policy that has been made by the government is leveraged, that leverage can only happen once we have more cash on the table. Okay. I can tell you there's no dearth of policy, there's no dearth of talent, there's definitely no dearth of ideas, but space is a long-term business. The returns will not come to you today or tomorrow. The returns will come to you maybe 15, 20 years later. That said, I would say that the government has not done anything that is tough to be done. Incubation centers. I mean, for example, Abhishek may also know, very recently, the ISRO has actually joined hands with Visvesvaraya Institute of Technology and made incubation centers. What more can we do, right? But yes, funding is a huge challenge, and that needs to be taken care of. The DOS is, of course, very forward-looking. The new in-space, which is sort of a regulator as well as a facilitator, to build bridges, that is there. But still, the IP, most of the IP is with the government, with the ISRO, and I'm not sure, but maybe the technologies which will be developed by ISRO. I mean, ISRO is supposed to develop technologies. Maybe the first right would go to NSIL before it could be licensed to anybody else. But I hear that maybe the first right would be with NSIL. Obviously, they are their in-house agency. So that's for the space. I think I'll leave defense for Abhishek.
Okay, I think that was a very interesting point you made, that it's time that India really sort of expanded other centers and just not remained in the south where all this is taking place, and private players and that sort of money should now come on the table. I think that's a very important point, because without money, I don't personally think that innovation can take place.
Actually, funding should be opened up to international collaboration. Why should we just look into Indians funding the sector? And if let's say if a constellation, the nano satellites or micro satellites or constellations are being developed, that technology is being developed, like electric, propulsion that Abhishek spoke about earlier. If it's being developed, why should we not be able to exploit it commercially and sell it abroad, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that kind of policy initiative still has to come. If we are closed, we will not be able to, move as fast as we would be able to move in case we are open to collaboration, international funding, and exports. I understand there's a lot of regulatory gray area in this, but that's something that can be done. And another thing is this, Aditya, maybe we've not touched about it, and we've also not talked about it, is space law. I mean, space law is something that the national law schools in India should be talking about now.
Absolutely.
Right? If we do not train our people in international space law, how are we going to safeguard our assets? They are our assets. How are we going? And I mean, the Spacecom is there, for example. I cannot even imagine that an Indian, communication company would put its, assets in space without legally, ensuring that they are safe, right? So
Right.
that should be a part of the curriculum. And this all can happen only in quick time if we are open to international collaboration in terms of technology, in terms of funding, as also exports.
Okay. I think that was a good point as well. The last point you made, I think, made a lot of sense, because I think it's very important that all these regulatory ideas that India is holding on to since perhaps say the 60s, I think it's time to shed them and sort of understand the new world that we're entering in. Okay, so Mr. Verma, I come to you because I want the most expansive answers from you, because you perhaps may be able to influence policy as well. So we are hoping that you can.
I'll try my best. I can't assure you. We are advisors, and government clearly says,
Of course.
we are not bound to your advice. We'll listen to you.
But you sit on the table, and there is a chance that the right bureaucrats and people at Niti Aayog and all sorts of people can perhaps take in your word for how to take the future on. So how would you say that you've heard Mr. Srivastav, you've heard Commodore Singh, and you already know a lot of people in this sector. So how would you say what's the next step that the government should take on ground, not just policy making, not just a PIB release that we read, but on ground, what should be done so that we really see an emergence of new technologies in terms of space and aero defense, and also that the government is ready. How do you change that mindset that the government is ready to accept, like Commodore Singh said, there should be a level playing field for the private sector. You're not really working for government assets here. You're working for everyone. You're working for the country. So how do you think that should happen? Because you are on the table, you speak to both sides. So now you tell us.
Yeah, I mean, very pertinent question, Aditya. And, I always begin my point with an example, because when you give a real world example, it helps people to connect. So let us see how the shipbuilding ecosystem died, which was so wonderfully covered by Anil sir here. That around 2007, if I'm not wrong, India withdrew a key subsidy, which killed the sector slowly and slowly. And today we have such beautiful assets lying in NCLT process today, where we would be building ships for the world. So my advice to government is that you have come up with the right sets of policies. You have encouraged the ecosystem, but these are early days. Do not leave the hand. We are not yet there. Let me cover two important points here. First, on the funding side, I was speaking to I would not like to name him, but one of the top management executive of India's largest defense OEM and tier one. He said, Abhishek, I can make any system in the world defense platform, sub-platform component, but I will still be not price competitive when I export it. It's quite surprising to us. You're not getting the cost arbitrage when you're making defense component in India is the cost of capital. He says, I still get the money so expensive that what China makes or other player makes in defense ecosystem, I'm not able to meet the get the cost arbitrage. So that is pretty surprising. We all know cost of capital has been the issue, but it's time government has to take it sector wise. So we recently came out with a very good paper on shipbuilding, and I'll share with AJ sir for his comment also. And we say that, you have to deal sector, because of its special characteristics and the assistance the sector requires. So you can't make cost of capital available at the same rate to everyone. You have to focus on sectors and their specific needs. So that's one area I would say government has to really, really focus and make sure we don't lose the advantage. Uh, the second area where I would like the government to focus is that, the real force multiplier in defense production, the people who will help us achieve the target are going to be MSMEs of India. We have huge MSME base. I mean, in a state like UP, you have 90 lakh MSMEs. Similar is the case in Tamil Nadu. So these are the people, if you have to encourage in defense production, and so many of them talk to us. The first thing they say is, "Sir, order kaise milega?" You know, I will make the prototype. I will invest. Sir, how will I get the order?
और पेमेंट कब मिलेगा?
Yes, that is also a problem. So, now relating this point to IDEX, Aditya. See, IDEX is a very wonderful initiative, but it is not enough. You give grants. Grant is a money which a person takes home, develop a prototype, help himself out with some of the working capital requirement, and it's over. But I have been speaking from quite some time now that government bodies need to start investing in these startups or the new technologies for two reasons. Number one is ensure that these kind of dual use technology or highly confidential technologies remain with you. That's the safeguard which they have built in IDEX also. But most importantly is to solve this problem of order kahan se aayega. I have seen personally so many state governments have gone ahead and made joint ventures with some of the huge the leading firms, say in IT sector. Government still having minority shareholding in those enterprises, but through the right approvals at cabinet level or other level, they are able to give them assured work. So if that's a model which can work in providing IT citizen services to citizens, it can work in government sector also. And we must make a try to solve this problem of giving orders. So if it's a government funded or government is a shareholder in that defense enterprises, they can be taken through a separate route of procurement. It's not easy, but it's one of the suggestions which I have been speaking about in all forums and places. So overall, I feel government should not leave the hand. It's early days. The sector has to really be handheld for a quite long time. Capital is one of the area which has to be focused, and second is ensuring the continuous orders. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Verma. I think, what I get from talking to all three of you is that continuity of orders, ease of capital, taking the private sector on board, and ease of regulation. Regulation which does not hark back to, say, the 60s or 70s or 80s, but looks forward to 2030 and 2040 and what we need to develop in terms of strategic assets. These are not just things that need to be sold and purchased. These are also all strategic assets, from space to aerospace to defense. These are things that the country needs, irrespective of which government is in power. The Chinese threat is also going to be there for a long time. So I think we've had a very informative and a very insightful discussion, all thanks to you three. And would any of you like to offer any last comments? Because I may have missed out a question or two. If there's something on your mind you'd like to say before we wrap this up.
Yeah, a couple of points I'll just like to make, because one of the themes of today's talk was innovation.
Yes.
A lot of initiatives have been taken by the government. I mean, you've got to give the government that, despite the fact that we've criticized some of their policies. In terms of IDEX, they're trying to do a little bit. In terms of AI, there's a task, Defense Ministry has a task force on artificial intelligence. RM heads the DAIC Council. So there are efforts happening, but like Abhishek said, they have to be taken through to the logical conclusion and not sort of, it should not remain a policy initiative, personality shaped and suddenly loses momentum somewhere. That should not happen. And not only is it, just to give you an example, a year ago or about 2 years ago, 2 American destroyers in the Malacca Straits collided with merchant ships within a fortnight of each other. Of course, the inquiries were held and everything, and it was finally attributed to crew error, the officer of the watch negligence. But one of the lines of inquiry, and this was seriously taken, was the GPS system messed around by somebody else,
Yes, I
which caused
remember.
these ships
Yes.
to collide.
Yes.
And then somebody made a very telling comment in a seminar that if a person were to stand ashore near the Malacca Straits with a GPS, he can actually mess around with this navigation system of the ships which are flying through that. So can you imagine the potential for damage that a simple guy standing on a next to a river or next to a strait can actually cause? So we have to be careful about these kind of technologies. And recently we heard about, that the Bombay grid failure, was it attributable to a Chinese malware? So these are the sort of force multipliers now that we have to guard against. Therefore, not only do we have to develop our own technologies to do to others what they're trying to do to us, but prevent them from doing to us what we think they can do. And I'm not sure that in that we've also gone down, to the extent we should in developing our own defensive systems to prevent something like this from happening.
Okay.
So, the firewalls in place. We still find that many a times, you're finding simple thing like on Zoom. I think they call it Zoom bombing or something. Some external agent is able to come and disrupt a meeting. So it's things like this. So the power of disruption that these new technologies are going to bring is going to be so immense that just trying to counter them is going to be a challenge. And that is a challenge which we have to address and take to its logical conclusion. And I think the government is well aware of it. How much is actually being done? I'm sure plenty must be getting done. But how much is being done, we really don't know. We're just hoping that the right amount is being done. Thanks. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Commodore Singh. I think, you wrapped it up beautifully. The point that we started with, innovation and its logical conclusion. It's obviously, to take on challenges of disruption, new disruptions that have yet not come forward. Obviously, otherwise, what's the point? We can't be just, sitting ducks when the war comes or when the battle comes. So I thank you, gentlemen. And before I go, before you leave, I just have one request to make of you. Would you like to say a word or two about the ET AeroDef 2021 series of talks that we are having right now?
Okay, let me take the lead in that as well. No, I think it's a great initiative ET is taking because we all know that ET is a very respected newspaper. And when when you read something in ET, you expect it to be the absolute, it's authenticated, and a lot of people seriously read it and take serious inputs from that. So I think if a publication like ET or the Times of India Group were to encourage these sort of initiatives, it will lead to a much larger awareness of a sector that by and large most people in this country are not very aware of. They know there's an army, they know there's a navy, they know things are happening, but more such interaction will bring it out in the open. And I think there's a lot of more public debate required on matters of national security than there is happening at the moment. I mean, we are a country which in 75 years after independence as a democracy, as a robust parliamentary democracy, have not issued a single white paper on defense in 75 years. Now that is a major anomaly. Countries are doing it every 5 years. Even China does one every 5 years because it gives the country an idea of what exactly is our national security strategy, where exactly are we headed, what is the intention. So I think we need to address all these issues. More debate needs to be done. There has to be more public awareness. More public debate needs to be generated. And I think from that perspective, such fora from reputed publications like ET would be very useful, no doubt. Thank you very much. And I want to thank you for inviting me on this. I consider it a privilege to be part of this.
Sir, I would like to thank you.
Aditya, just one thing, since you brought this up, see, what we need is a platform, and that is what ET is doing by providing a platform and such a diverse range of topics that are being discussed. It's not only technology, it's not innovation, it's about industry, it's about self-reliant India, Atmanirbhar Bharat. So if you are providing a platform where such diverse topics can be discussed, it is imperative that we thank you for this, and we also request that this should be continued. Also, maybe whatever comes out of all the discussions that we've been having, if you could distill it into some kind of a thought leadership series, or maybe come out with a paper, and you could present it to the government. This is what the so-called technology experts or industry experts or consultants think about it, and that could be a very vital input, because to provide that input from such diverse sources into one thing, one point of, I would say, contact would be something that the government would also maybe be very welcome to, get it from you.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. I mean, and Mr. Verma, we'd
Yes,
like
yes,
kind words from you as well,
So I would second what AJ sir and Ratan sir said. They are, they covered almost everything. I'll just, throw it back to you what you told me, that I have the seat at table, so it's important for me to give the perspective. But you have a far, far bigger reach than, any of us here. You are there in every hand in the country, probably in early morning, or probably will be after the corona is fully over. So, it's very important that you guys bring the debate of public and private participation in aerospace and defense, which is very important. That's the only way to go forward and match what, some of the adversaries are doing in today's world. And once we bring that debate on this public platform, the new ideas, sprung up. And very pertinent suggestion from Ratan sir that then we should compile this and take it as a white paper to the government. If government is not coming out, let's take what the citizens are saying. Yeah, thank you.
And Abhishek and I have been colleagues at KPMG. So Abhishek and I, we can both say that we can only advise. Whether the advice is acted upon is something that the government decides. Both
government is not bound to take our advice, but this kind of public opinion they will definitely value.
I mean,
from this platform.
While Abhishek was working on the defense side, I was working on the MSME side with his team while I was at KPMG. And I can assure you, I mean, we can only do a bit, but you can do lots because you are taking a complete picture, the complete landscape. And that, if it goes as one point of contact to the government, as a white paper, as a thought leadership, or whatever you want to call it, is going to be a very vital input to the government, both in the Ministry of Defense and the Space Department of Space as well.
Okay, thank you, sir. I mean, those were exceedingly kind words. I think I should mention that in my appraisal as well. The kind of reach we have. So apparently, so we'll wrap it up, and I'd just like to say that the media or any publication, be it any publication in the world, it gains its strength from experts, from people who work in the domain. I mean, I would know nothing of the sort of anecdotes that Commodore Singh shared, or the sort of insights you shared and Mr. Verma shared. I would know nothing of it because these are obviously things that you would know in your position. So I am thankful to you, and we at ET are thankful to you that you came on board, gave us your time, gave us your insight, and we hope that we can continue some other talks as well and bring you all, on board as well, and share some insightful ideas, that can reach the right people. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
ET AeroDef Summit 2021 is an attempt to address the challenges faced by the Indian defense and aerospace sector and offer solutions to make India a truly reckoning force in the future. We hope the series of dialogues on leveraging technology and the rising role of private players will open gates to create an innovative ecosystem in the AeroDef space. Thanks for being part of this initiative. Stay tuned for much more coming your way.